Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the PGPMAX Industry Dialogue. So the Industry Dialogue, to brief you about the session, is a thought leadership series that brings together PGPMAX alumni from a particular industry to talk about a relevant topic or from the relevant industry. So this initiative was basically launched to drive ideas and industry relevant discussions from our Max alumni. So for this session today, we will be covering the industry finance, and the topic would be the next, the why, the how. The way we'll be doing this session is, the discussion will go on for around 40-45 minutes. And if you have any relevant questions in between, you can put it up in the Q&A box, and or we can have your Q&A, towards the later part of the session. So without delaying the session further, let me introduce the panel and the speaker to you. So today we have Mr. Jatin Khanna from the PGPMAX batch of 2011. He heads the corporate development for Raymond Group of companies. Welcome, Jatin.
Thank you.
Then we have Sunanda Agrawal, who is from the batch of 2020. She is the group finance controller for Microsoft. Welcome, Sunanda, for the session today.
Thank you, Smriti.
Yeah. We do have Mr. Kunal Sangui.
We lost your words, Smriti.
Smriti, we can't hear you.
I think she's joining back.
Sorry, guys, I just got disconnected because of the network. I'll again, add Kunal here. I think he just got, okay. Sorry. Over to you, Vikas, for taking over this session from your on.
Yeah, thank you, Smriti, and thank you everyone for joining, especially on a weekend. And hopefully this session would provide you some insights on the future of finance, and I'm sure the future is bright. So the days are there wherein CEOs are looking to the finance function more broader and deeper set of strategic responsibilities than ever before. So they expect much more from the CFOs, of course, from the finance team. We hear disruption happening in business models by the startups, and now we hear that there's a disruption which is happening in the finance function, which it must cater to all the demands of its customers, and customers are not only just internal, but almost entirely the business, the regulators, the board, and everyone. So I think the key question would be, I think first I'll ask all the panelists. First would be what changes they have seen in the roles and responsibilities of the finance leaders in the last decade, and what further change they see in the future years. So I think Jatin, you can start.
Sure. So I think over the last decade, the role of finance has evolved quite substantially. There was a time when finance was essentially about bookkeeping. Now from bookkeeping, it has become a firstly, a transformator in terms of the processes itself, which is through technology. There is a lot of technology transformation which is going on, in which finance function is expected to partner. The second is that I think the role has expanded to business partnering. Now, on the business partnering front, a finance leader is expected to be someone who helps build the business, who's very strong in business strategy, who can help and integrate, acquire and integrate assets, someone who can, deal with external stakeholders like private equity, to investors, to to some of those category of people as well. The CFOs today are even managing the board function. So clearly they are in some sense being looked upon to practically create more and more space for CEO to just focus on people and the business, and practically every other function is now more or less getting subsumed in the finance function. So I think it's become a much broader function over a period of time, and that and has evolved materially, is how I would put it.
So I hope the salaries would have increased proportionately. So I think Suninda, what about you?
So I completely second what Jatin said. There has been a huge transformation in the CFO role. One, and amongst all other things, I think it has changed in two areas, like Jatin mentioned, that in terms of the expectation of the board from the CFOs and the technology disruption that has happened, forcing finance leaders to adopt and innovate using technology and accelerate digital transformation of finance functions. And earlier, finance was largely focused on stat and tax compliances, analyzing the company's financial risk, ensuring accurate financial records, and reporting it back to the CEO and the board. But today, finance leaders, like Jatin said, are looked as business partners. They are a key contributor to the business strategy and performance, are driving complex deal negotiations. They are business partnering to drive growth. So definitely the role has changed drastically, in terms of being an enabler and business partner to the sales leaders, the board, and customers to drive growth.
In fact, which is why you see really today, most of the CFOs over time transition to a CEO role in the organization.
Yeah, that's a good incentive for us to do something more. So Kunal, your views?
Sure, I think so. Very well covered by Jatin and Sunanda. I just want to add a few points there. See, if you see, these are changing times, and there is a lot of disruption that we see all around the place. At the same time, people are experiencing a need to transform their business models. And while they are transforming their business models, it is very, very difficult to try and change all the matrices, change all the spends, cost components, the so-called resource allocation, the capital allocation. So when all of this is required to be changed, as an evangelist, CFOs have to be, first of all, become very alert. Per se, they are always have to be on their toes. So whatever they are doing, first of all, it has become very intensive and sensitive. So that has brought the overall role into eminence. See, as we all know, any senior leaders have to step into anything that an organization needs at any given point in time. And that is what even is also looked upon from the CFOs as well. But at the same time, it is also seen that whenever there is a requirement to try and strategically transform your organization, innovate in certain very significant areas, they are also seen as a strong validators that whether this really calls, because you are experimenting a lot of things as an organization person, you are also exposed to a lot of new things. So when there is a lot of newness, there is also, you can say, holes in the walls. And then it is expected that CFOs are being called to really validate that there are no holes in the walls that we are seeing. One more important, interesting aspect that I want to highlight is, analysis has come to a very, very forefront, and data management is becoming a very important aspect. Now, as we all know, data is the new oil, and like there is an importance of oil all over the place, and so has now become the data, wherein everybody has data, and there is over data. There is an overwhelming amount of data that we are seeing. So with this amount of data, there is something that everybody wants to do at any given point in time, and they want to try and see. Now, within this data, first of all, data is required to be managed. Then secondly, it is important that this data has to be converted into a relevant information. There are a lot of steady state reportings, dashboards, etc., which is there. But over and above that, there are a lot of hypotheses that as an organization you want to validate. And then this calls for a lot of AI, ML, and multiple things to be applied to this data. And that too, there is a requirement is kind of on the fly. So that's where a lot of machine learning, deep learning, and this overall analytics angle is coming within the ambit of CFOs. So I'm just kind of touching few important areas where CFOs are venturing, but the role has become very, very sensitive, and that's leading to all the transformations of business model.
Yeah, so looks like the KPI has gone up from financial reporting compliances. Now we have to be business partners, innovators, enablers, data analysts.
While we are speaking, actually, CFOs are ending up defining the KPIs for the rest of the organization. So
yeah, so with all this, when we know that all these changes have done, and I see that future of finance have become that we come out of finance and see the business overall. So what steps should we take, or what steps the CFO should take to ensure that we are future ready to meet all these expectations? So Jatin, you want to go ahead with that?
Sure. So I think there are a few critical elements. Firstly, like I spoke about, like we all spoke about, that the role has now evolved from being a finance-driven role to a business partnering role. So I think as CFOs, we should spend enough time to basically upskill ourselves by either a formal coaching or in some form like PGPMAX. I mean, I was a CFO when I did PGP. Well, I became CFO after I did PGPMAX. So that I think is one thing. Of course, some form of formal education which helps you to understand businesses better, I think is extremely critical. Second is, I think it's very important to keep one up to date in terms of what's going on and not just domestic, but in macroeconomic environment, the global macroeconomic environment. So I think it's very important to and because as we are seeing, we live in a connected world, and and I'm sure we are all reading that how recession in US is hurting the way business in India is being done. So in some sense, how the supply chains are getting disrupted all over the world. So so that's the second aspect. I think the third aspect is clearly on the technology front. Both my fellow panelists, Sunanda and Kunal, spoke about the whole data and tech piece. I think clearly today's CFO has to upgrade themselves or upskill themselves to understand the nuances of technological transformation or digital transformation which is undergoing, so that they could potentially drive their organization towards that transformation, as well as build on build on the whole data analytics engine to really take their organization forward.
Sunanda, what do you feel? What steps should be taken that we meet all these high expectations?
So I think first of all, I totally echo what Jatin said, and that's why I also did my PGPMAX. From a core finance professional to really gaining. It really helped me gain more knowledge of business. And I think other than upskilling, of course, I'll touch the topic which is closest to my heart, which is, of course, on the tech side, being in Microsoft. I think today the finance organizations are in a transitional phase in terms of innovation, transformation, and collaboration. So for a CFO to be future ready, definitely, I think they need to embrace the new and evolving technologies such as machine learning and AI, like Kunal touched upon. And also, the fact is that constant regulatory and compliance changes, talent retention, market situation is making finance digital transformation a moving target. So my advice would be that finance leaders should be prepared to invest in technology, take a leadership role in tech adoption, like Kunal said, that they are involved in all the decisions. So it's the CFO a lot of time who's actually, when we also go to customers, it's the CFO who's significantly involved in the decision making of tech adoption for the organization. So I think those are the few callouts from my side for the CFO to be future ready, as well as make their organizations to be future ready.
Yeah, and by the way, Jatin was in the dean's list. So after a completion, he became CFO. So hopefully we also get, presently I'm doing, so hopefully I get something and go to next role. So I think last, whatever we spoke, almost every second or third sentence, we were talking about tech, we were talking about digital, we were talking about data. So I think it has so much become part and parcel of our work. So this technological disruption is affecting all corners of the business. And I think finance is no exception. So I think we can directly go to the expert, Sunanda. You are the expert here from Microsoft. So I think what the technological disruption, what kind of digital transformation shall we expect now?
So I think, Jatin and Kunal also touched upon that today, finance transformation is about, spending less time on transactional activities. We are focusing more on delivering insights to drive better business decisions. CFOs are involved in business decisions. I think if I see from my experience, there are 3 transformation areas within a finance organization that can be transformed with technology or should be the focus areas. One is business process automation, that is enabling greater efficiency through automation. So while finance tasks are critical to an organization's success, but they are repetitive and tedious, most of them. So through automation, we need to reduce cost, improve the quality and agility of finance processes, reduce manual workload, so that will allow our finance team to spend more time on strategic decision making. So that is the first step. The second would be in terms of the financial reporting and analysis, like in terms of really leveraging machine learning, AI to do data mining and throw out meaningful insights on a real-time basis. So it's just not about reporting the facts. A lot of analytics goes, which is future focus in terms of what can we do to drive growth. And I think the third is also now that, from a workplace productivity. So, finance function is highly collaborative. We are depending on strong relationship with the business partner groups. So, and with COVID, now we work in a hybrid workspace. So it's important that with remote and hybrid work environments, how do we really, finance leaders really need to think that, how they create that collaborative environment, collaborative workspace using technology, so that we have good working relationship and there is collaboration overall with all the other business groups. So I think those would be the focus areas from a digital transformation of finance function.
Yeah, and at least one thing I can say is this: the finance guys are generally very busy as such, and hopefully this digital transformation will give us some time for a work-life balance also. So I think Kunal, you are in HDFC Securities, and a lot of things are happening in the fintech industry and your industry. So what kind of transformation you see? Because we see a lot of fintechs and a lot of things happening in your side of business.
Sure, I think so. Very valid question. We are actually in mid of a whole of the BFSI fintech era. And when we see that, we are nowhere less, because the whole of the business runs on a lot of technology. And there are a lot of technology products that essentially turns out to be these things. When you ask for HDFC Securities and the whole of broking and capital market industry, the kind of overall awareness, closeness that is coming for the customers has a lot of technology in it, and that's making a lot of sense for them. So let's take an example of a customer who is wanting to try and open their accounts. So everything is digital now, zero, completely paperless. So, and in 10 minutes, he's onboarded, as against what used to happen earlier before years is like 15 to 30 days of physical paperwork, more than 20-30 signatures. Now with that, there is a lot of focus that is going from a customer facing perspective on how that can be eased, how there are more features, how basically there is less clutter, etc. All of that is also. Now coming to the more of the backend functions, what you can do. So the businesses are enabled to finance, like the open architecture, the adoption of cloud. This is something that is getting a center stage for all the organizations. And this is giving a lot of auto scalability to the overall business function. So as we all know as finance professionals, that capacity is something very important, and we have to take decisions as to what is the amount of capacity we need to build. Now here, because of the adoption of cloud and similar things, there are products that are available on demand. You can put it on the go. It's kind of a marketplace that is being used. So there are a lot of more features that is coming to the customers and also to the finance professionals. At the same time, there is a lot of, even if you kind of 10x go, the 10x the capacity, we are kind of ready. It is as simple as that, because it is getting auto scaled in the overall manner. So that is on the customer facing side. Now, if you also try and ask internally how the organizations are functioning, so this open architecture that is providing your open APIs to the rest of the world. Okay, let's say you take any top of the line trading apps or websites, and if they want to consume our APIs, they can consume, make available, dealing in stock broking, opening their demat accounts, etc. on their digital properties in the backend through us. So now this is going to be a complete game changer, because what is going to happen is there are a lot of people who are going to consume our APIs and try and be there as using us in the backend, but be allowing it to friend. Now this is creating a lot of penetration. And this penetration is something that we are witnessing. So if you ask for a capital markets industry and per se broking, only in last 1 year, there is approximately more than 4.5 to close to 5 crores of, that is 50 million of new demat accounts, which is almost doubled. And this is unprecedented. We have never seen in the history this kind of numbers. So these is the kind of things that is happening thanks to technology completely, what it's bringing in finance, because now everybody wants to make their financial planning. Everybody wants to do their wealth creation, and we are enabling that using technology. And also thanks to internet, because the kind of speeds that is coming through internet is actually making it all possible. So a lot happening in this space, be it broking, technology, capital markets. There is technology all over the place. That is what I can tell you.
Yeah, so I think that all will show in your results as well, possibly. And
absolutely,
if
we are registering 80% growth last year, and last year we registered about 40% growth. And this is completely like the industry itself is growing very tremendously.
And if you have not introduced you as CFO, possibly someone might think you are a tech guy. Okay, so I think all this disruption and everything will be only possible when you have an ideal workforce who has the required capabilities and skills. As we said, that it's not just our core finance function, but to be more proactive, to ensure that we build up those capabilities. So how do we ensure that we bring those capabilities in our team, and we have an ideal workforce who thinks about technology every time? Because as we have heard from panelists that it is basically you spend less time to do more work. So how do we ensure that we have that ideal workforce? So I think Sunanda, you can go ahead.
So I think one thing that is most important is to upskill. Like we need to upskill our teams, our workforce on tech side. We need to enable them to be able to innovate. And one of the examples, let me share an example, when COVID came in and we all suddenly moved to this remote work environment. So we have, I'm sure everybody has seen that Microsoft, we had long used these Excel and OneNote, PowerPoint, SharePoint, etc. to facilitate productivity and collaboration. But then in the most recent years, we also had Power Apps and Power BI, which are low code technology. And when this challenge was thrown that, when with COVID came in, how do we, with employees working from home, how do we make sure that, say, supply of equipment like laptops, monitors, accessories to all our employees, including new hires? It sounded like a Herculean task given that we are a 120,000 employee company. A simple Power App solution was developed to take all the intake requests from employees, what they need, what is their address, and just it triggered a workflow to the finance, to the procurement, to make sure that there is agility, there is a scalability in terms of enabling the business to deliver as as it was if everything was normal. So I think it's important for the finance team to really upskill on the tech side and constantly innovate, be tech intensive. And that's how only, like I said, we are in a transition phase and we need to constantly keep on evolving.
So Kunal, I think Sunanda and Microsoft are bringing you all the tools and infrastructure. So now how do you ensure your team does utilize all this or get up to technological changes? Yeah, Kunal.
Kunal, you are on mute.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
I was on mute. Yeah. So that's correct. I think so. It is very important to try and see how basically this happens. And as rightly said by Sunanda, there is more technology on our doorsteps than we can consume. But when we look behind, we have consumed a lot. And then the larger challenge is how customer adopts it, and at the same time, how other employees also adopt it. So there is a lot of, so there are multiple things that is required to be done to see the adoption, and adoption is the key. One of the key things that we have seen is that has worked for all of us is let people experience it. So there has to be incentives for people to experience this kind of technologies, and wherein we kind of try and make it available to people. And then in certain places, employees see a lot of value. Now, when you come to clients as well, you need to create the right intervention and nudges in the life of client to provide these features. And a lot of apps do it very well by creating a lot of notifications. And then they try and trick you to the right areas wherein this kind of technologies help. So this is making a lot of inroads and the adoption is changing. Okay, obviously there are cash incentives and other freebies that comes in over a period of time, but that is something that we have seen it not necessarily works in the healthy spirit wherein it really makes the intent-driven users to use it rightly. But their right construct goes a long way to make sure that the adoption is very high, and that is something that is very important. So to tell you, there is more to adopt. But when we go back, we already adopted a lot, so more to implement as well. And then it's all going hand in hand. The investments in technology are completely skyroofed to make sure that everything is made available. And that's where we see companies like Microsoft and many others are having, in fact, they are also having a lot of clogging in terms of the people and time. And then they are not able to kind of service everything immediately. They are trying to see how best they can do, and there are long queues.
Yes, so that was right that you have so many technological changes which are happening and which are there just outside our this thing. So, so between Kunal and Sunanda, anyone can take it. So in case, so even though we see that, okay, we need to do all these changes, but the initial investments are generally very high for these technological changes. So how do you evaluate that, okay, we need to do, because you have tens of changes which might be there. How do you ensure, and how do you see the return coming from selecting one specific kind of technology change which you want to adopt? Any one of you can take, Kunal.
So essentially, let me highlight to you, you need to get people from one era to another. Okay. And then so is the case with workforce. Okay. So when you try to work out a return, it just does not, the math really does not sums up as great. Okay. You just need to see how you are able to keep your technology investments in a manner that you are able to get into the right business model, and you have to kind of bet on the larger market size that will be there or in the long run, and you need to take this kind of things. So what is more important is you need to make sure that you are doing right things, which will get people to the right place. If we just try to see the ROI from a current construct perspective, then it may not necessarily be really that great. You need to fit in the larger market size. The second important thing is when it comes to the overall workforce as well, see the workforce, essentially all organizations have traditional workforce as well as new age workforce. New age workforce, you did not really struggle to get them used to technology. And when I say traditional workforce, it's not necessarily the people who are aged, but basically the people who have been there for a while and they have not necessarily become as such technology centric. Okay, wherein they carry a lot of wisdom in terms of what needs to be done and where it needs to be done. And that's where essentially what you need to rightly do is you need to expose them to technology, make them experience and create an environment wherein they actually start adopting a lot of technology. And it's an uphill task. But when you do that, essentially the ROIs automatically start going up. So it's a transition of people using their wisdom and at the same time making sure that how your ROIs really go up. And then it's a very integrated per se approach as well. And that's where one needs to really walk that path. And then eventually you need to carve out a path to profitability rather than necessarily ROI. Because a path to profitability is very important as compared to necessarily what you are generating as an ROI. To give you an example also, if you return a lot of your money to your shareholders, okay, you sit on a lesser buffer, your ROIs anyway go up.
So I think Sunanda will be laughing because ROI or no ROI, still their technology changes, people would have to adopt anyways. So
I think Kunal said it very well. It's a journey. That's I will definitely say for any customer, you know, when we talk to them, that's the advice I give to all the CFOs also, that it's a journey. But like Kunal said, you will see the results in terms of your own workplace productivity and profitability. Yeah, so it's a journey. But definitely, if you don't adopt it, you will be left behind.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, you would be left
behind. You know, I'll just sort of supplement, chime in here. I think ROI is a very critical decision-making tool when it comes to the finance CFOs. But I think in today's day and age, I don't think so. Technological adoption or transformation is a choice. It's a compulsion, necessity. It's, you know, it's something which one has to do. So I think there's an element of prioritization which one can sort of bring in through the ROI being the tool to say what is the most high impact technological transformation I can make, and which is what I think. So one can prioritize, but not do it type of a story.
Yeah,
just to kind of add to what Jatin said, very rightly said by Jatin, and just to add to it, see, basically, we chase returns is one thing, but a long-term value appreciation is something as a CFOs we chase big time. So here you are not necessarily looking at a certain return as an ROI, but you are looking at certain X multiple of what you will get out of it or in the long run. So it's a bigger, much bigger pie to kind of grab it.
Yeah. So now I'm feeling comfortable getting more money out of our investments. So diverting from technology and all and making some sense of our degree, what we studied so hard for, our CA degree. So now I'm diverting a little bit from the technology and coming into space like some mergers and acquisitions. So I think Jatin is our expert here with so many mergers, acquisitions, and JV is all handled by him. So how this M&A landscape is defining the future of finance?
Well, I think I'd say it in a big way. I mean, it's sort of in a big way. You can see, I mean, in the old days, a large business house will go and acquire small businesses. Today, you see, for synergistic reasons or otherwise, I mean, very large business houses coming together. So clearly the M&A landscape is changing materially. I mean, if you just sort of look at the papers, I mean, large cement makers are getting acquired. Big telecom companies come together. So I think what now M&A landscape has is evolving as are we evolving in our thinking in terms of saying, it's not my shareholding which counts. What counts is basically the share price, and that really defines the whole hypothesis of M&A, because the whole M&A sort of hypothesis is 2 + 2 is equal to 5 and not 4. So to that extent, I think the whole, and which is why we see the whole M&A landscape changing, I mean, sort of coming up in a big way, more, including in our own country. And, as you look at some of the global trends also, wherein, some large, let's say, M&A are happening in media entertainment space, some large, acquisitions are happening for, we all know the famous Twitter and, this whole Elon Musk story. So I think, and I think what's driving some of these decisions is not, so most of the M&A is generally driven by synergies, but I think in more particularly this example, it was driven by basically capital de-risking. So today, you want to really de-risk to say, I mean, all my eggs are in one basket, which has become the largest basket in the world. So how do I sort of, disaggregate my ownership of that asset and actually spread it across other assets? So to that extent, I think the M&A landscape is becoming quite interesting, and the objectives are driving your decision making in terms of M&A. I mean, another interesting combination which is happening is the M&A sort of this thing, and we spoke so much about tech. So there's a lot of M&A happening between offline and online players. We saw Byju's acquiring Akash. I mean, there is whole news flow around we trying to do in Raymond something with a tech player. So, so an online offline businesses coming together is a very interesting, again, M&A space which is opening up. I mean, from the changing landscape standpoint.
Considering the So considering the M&A, especially the partnership with startups, now has become a part and parcel of the business. So earlier we used to see banks who were supposed to be technologically more upgraded earlier years, but now we see that bankers itself take help of a lot of startups and all to ensure that they stay relevant in the business. So again, question to Jatin and Kunal. So how would you evaluate, in the sense, especially in cases where you have to do partnership with startups, where you have to do strategic investment in the startups, especially where CFOs, as we are so much ingrained with profitability and all, and now we have to invest in startups possibly who might be in losses. So how do you evaluate startups joining your business as a partner or as an investment? So Kunal, possibly you can go ahead first.
Sure. So very rightly said, in fact, because startup is a space that is something evolved very well thanks to a lot of private equity investors and the entrepreneurs all around, who have led to the overall sphere of innovation and trying to create something which is path-breaking. Large organizations need to adopt this, and it's very difficult for large organizations to innovate these seamlessly. Startups generally turn out to be agile as well, And this is the characteristics all large organizations want to have. And they somewhere or the other hit the roadblock. Now, having recognized that, the co-venturing is one of the very key things which is essentially tried and given a lot of inroads as a solution and as a bridge between the organizations and the startups. And co-venturing is also becoming a breeding ground, not only for capital appreciation, which turns out to be relatively smaller from a large organization's perspective, but also from an innovation perspective. And to inculcate the DNA into every person of how basically they can innovate, it is something wherein you need to have a dedicated, separate focus team who is passionate about what they are doing. And that probably we all have found answers in something known as startups. So that's where the relevance of startup comes. It's not only about investments, but it goes a long way in terms of making it strategic. So when you say you want to make it strategic, you're trying to do something with them in terms of either selling their products or trying to get some kind of a feature from them or some kind of a technology. And essentially, they end up actually becoming your extended partner for your overall deliverable to your customers, which helps you grow our market share in the industry. Now, that is purely strategic, and that essentially helps to try and create a larger value in the ecosystem. So when you do that, you have millions of customers lying with you, and those customers start using those things. The natural value of the startups go up. That's where you need to see a fit between your organizations and the kind of the product or the features the startup is bringing, or the kind of novelty in the idea that is coming. And then when you try to do that, essentially over a period of time, you see a lot of newness is constantly fostered into your own business, helping you to channelize and be always abreast and relevant in the new trend. And then, well, let me probably try and say you kind of became a trendsetter, and customer always finds something new with you. And that's where the story actually goes this long. And therefore, investments in startup really make it important. And that too strategic is something that is required. In fact, we ourselves are constantly on the lookout for something wherein we can really put in and try and see how we can try and get them, how we can get and integrate with us, where all we can add value. You need to bring in a lot of value adds to the startup, kind of work as a pseudo private equity guy in terms of mentorship, how to scale, getting the right governance, reportings in place. So all that hygiene, you need to create an infrastructure at your end as well to make sure that they are able to completely build well and become big. Acquisition is not necessarily always the answer. Okay, and then if you lose in the right people, well, a lot of time what happens is the founders are able to exit, and you are not necessarily able to take it as passionately forward in future, and very less benefit necessarily comes out. In fact, it becomes a burden to manage for the organization per se. And therefore, for a lot of M&As, to do it rightly, what rule that I have been following is the more no's you are told as compared to yes. So the no to yes ratio, the more higher it is, a more successful M&A can be. So that is something that's kind of worked, and you need to be really selective when you are doing M&As, integration, and how to take that thing forward, because you need passion on the floor and skin in the game when you need somebody to really try and make it bigger.
So Jatin, you have been an angel investor, and hopefully you would have got your 10x, 100x out of few of them. So how do you evaluate with respect to partnership with the business and the investments? How do you look at it?
So firstly, I think in today's day and age, the disruptions are happening in the startup world, because we are seeing a lot of businesses and business models being disrupted. So clearly, that's sort of the first, in some sense, tick box which you see, whether the startup comes, with an attractive, let's say, industry. It comes, is there a real disruption? Is the founder, very strong? Because I think you're really, end of the day, backing that founder. But the way, some of the world organizations, including my previous organization, they look at some of this is by basically creating a concept of something called an innovation lab. Now you can call it something else in a different organization setup, wherein you have like your own in-house Shark Tank equivalent set up in the organization, wherein you are constantly looking at new ideas and new startups in your related spaces, and then you get them go through the motion and create that contest and pick up winners, and therefore and that's how you in some sense choose some of these startups. And I think Kunal made a very, very pertinent point to say, invest behind the startup, don't acquire the startup, because obviously culturally it's a very, very different ball game altogether. And therefore it's important that the person who's really driving the startup and causing this disruption has enough skin in the game and is driving that disruptor forward. So I mean, so some of these things are extremely critical. But when it comes to shortlisting a startup, it goes down to back the right founder with the right business idea in a space which has enough growth possibility, and then you are likely to get it right. I mean, and so far all I can say is that I didn't have 10x or whatever, but because I've been a bit cautious in terms of selecting my startups, but at the same time I have not had a binary outcomes or at least an investment in a startup where I haven't recovered my capital or not generated enough returns. So that way, I think it's a risk and reward story, right? I mean, if you go to some of those binary outcome startups, you will possibly get 10x, 100x, the kind of outcomes also.
So Jatin, what kind of mindset change we need to do to invest in the startups?
No, the mindset change, one I said is that you should not look at controlling stake. I think clearly that is one big thing, because we would like to sort of go and buy any startup we look at. So that I think is a big issue when it comes to traditional corporate thinking, to say, boss, somebody else is driving it, he'll go and farm out the technology. But what also happens is that the technology gets better as the person learns, and and your competitive advantage does not come in just buying the startup, because if you buy the startup, somebody else will create another one. So I think that I think is a big mindset shift. And the second is that creating that culture, which I spoke about, the whole innovation lab type concept, wherein you are continuously looking at what's going on in your related fields, is another big change. And as opposed to being opportunistic about it, to say, somebody's come with an idea and it's sounding interesting or not interesting, but in which case, you're more likely than not, you're sort of likely to make wrong bets. So it's that process through which you look at some of these startups, I think is critical.
I just want to add, Vikas, to what Jatin said, from a mindset change which is required. I think we need to really look that the startups of today are our enterprise of tomorrow, and they will be our valued customers and partners in the future. So actually, we are investing in our future by investing in startups. The payback period might be long, but it's going to, it's a real investment in our own future.
Yeah. And if payback clicks, then you never know. It could be big multiplier. So I think we have one question here, so anyone of you can take it. So the question is, do we see in future finance organizations led by non-core finance executives? So whether any finance organization would be led by a non-core finance executive.
So let me try and take a crack at it. I mean, I've been a CFO for 7 years, and then I've now taken up a different role. See, I think what's very critical also is becoming this role is, while we all talk about transformation and how the role of CFO is evolving, but at the same time, one has to be very mindful of how the environment is evolving also. There is a lot of positive side of the environment which is evolving, but there's also partly a negative side of the environment, wherein compliances are getting very, very, onerous. There are strong penalties. There are, regulatory activism happening all over the place. We are seeing businesses going down under, and end of the day, practically for all, let's say, for all, I would say, in some sense, custodians of business, really value creation is the core objective. Now that value creation, we are seeing significantly getting impeded by some of those outages. So whilst, given the larger role of finance or a CFO, you can say, is becoming more business focused and transformation and technology focused, but I think there is still that core function of the CFO, which is why the CFO is the CFO, which is the whole bookkeeping, the compliance side of it. I think that also is becoming more and more onerous and complicated and challenging and difficult. So I'll say that I mean, at least personally, in my view, very, very difficult for non-core finance people to step into the shoes, because because we all come as finance executives, so we think that part of it is anyways a given, because we've sort of been groomed like that. But clearly, you put someone else who's not been groomed like that, the organization can actually go in a wrong direction.
So Kunal, what do you think? Either HDFC Securities or any of the finance companies could be led by a non-core finance executive?
So I don't know about HDFC Securities. We are very highly regulated, very much compliance driven. There are many regulators under the sun. We have right from SEBI's, RBI's of the world, we have to report. So let me not take that as an example to try and distort that whole piece. But there was one very interesting article in Feb 2022 magazine of Forbes, and that you should, to get an answer to this whole question, you should just look at that magazine. And while we are speaking, I kind of pulled out some of that things. They have the whole example of about 13 CFOs of large companies who are from non-finance background. And in fact, it also has some of ISBNs. Okay. And then, in fact, ISB has been used as a place to kind of change their overall role and try and get it to a place which we are looking at. So these is, and it's very much possible. And this is happening a lot as a trend in a lot of startups as well. So very much possible. I don't see that it's not possible. It will take its own years, because the accounting function is essentially taken a lot by the head of accounts or the so-called financial controller, who addresses a lot of the so-called old-aged related requirement. And it depends on how basically your organizational people are structured. But some of the examples, like some of the key glaring statements that you may want to hear is like to have means these are the kind of statements that have been highlighted, and on basis which there are a lot of people who are trying to come and address this kind of things. So very much possible, person.
So Nishu, Ketan, who had raised this question, so there is some ray of hope, and as we say in ISB, it depends. So it depends.
So Vikas, I just want to state on a lighter note as well that CFO has a huge responsibility of risk management, and no organization, and the CFO has a huge burden that the organization should not be in the news for wrong reasons. So as long as one is confident that you will make sure your organization is not in the news for wrong reasons, maybe you can give it a try,
or at least have a good team below who can do all this.
So I'll give you an interesting example actually. So we've had the situation wherein we've seen some of the let's say so-called non-chartered accountants being CFOs and all. In fact, in my previous organization, which I left about 9 months back, currently the CFO is a non-finance person. So I think it is possible in those organizations which are very, very evolved, which have strong people, custodian processes, owning some of these processes. But I think the way the regulatory requirements are going, and and now you are seeing a lot of people actually mandating. I mean, There are regulatory bodies which are mandating in some of the core businesses to say, boss, it can only be a CFO who's a custodian of finance function. While I come from an organization wherein there is a non-chartered accountant holding the current CFO role. So but then we have a deputy CFO to ensure all of that part of it. So you can structure your organization for that, but I think, I mean, then organization has to be of that size and scale and systems and processes, and wherein that part of the CFO's role is secured.
So we have another question from Jagannir. What are some of the examples of ML and AI being used in finance 5-10 years down the line? So I think Sunanda can see the future of technology.
Yeah, I think saying 5 to 10 years down the line, maybe I can't say, but I can say what it is being done today. I can take an example that, like, we have used MI and AL in our regular forecasting process, and there has been a significant cut down in terms of the time that was involved, and the accuracy has increased to as much as 96%, 98%. It trends around that. So I think that's where we are able to leverage. That's an example, and maybe as we move, as we evolve forward, of course, we'll bring in more efficiency, we'll bring in more agility. But then, as you heard from all the panelists, that it's all evolving. Our environment is very dynamic. The compliance requirement, maybe the risk side, everything is evolving. So, to address that, this will also need that kind of innovation. I think most important is finance professionals, as they upskill themselves, how they're able to innovate also.
So yeah, after we upskill ourselves, the future of finance would be we will not be part of finance and go into business side. So that's the future of finance, that finance people will move out of finance and take bigger roles. So I think we don't have any more
questions.
Robots
will take up that role.
Yeah, possibly that will happen. So I think the 10 years part, what Jagannil was asking, that's possible. After 10 years, this might happen. Yeah, so I think we don't have any more questions. So Smriti, over to you.
Sure, Vikas. Thank you, panelists, today for wonderful and insightful sessions. And audience, a great round of applause to you for being so patient on a Saturday evening and participating in the session today. I hope you will get to see more of such sessions in the coming week. Please stay tuned with us on our websites or on our emails to register for such sessions. And thank you, Vikas, Sunanda, Jatin, and Kunal for doing this session for us.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.